it suddenly became so quiet. It reminds me of when I did an interview with President Bush in Washington. We were preparing for the interview, and his assistants were all like, it was very lively in the room, in the press room, but then all of a sudden we heard someone walking and everyone stood still. And a minute later the president entered. Ladies and gentlemen, great to see you here in such number. In the name of partners of the project Meta Dekleta, Meta Women maybe in English, or just awesome women. Thank you very much for your time, for coming to the international conference. What can Iceland teach us? We have two great guests from Iceland here with us. According to World Economic Forum, the difference between men and women in terms of gender equality is the smallest in Iceland. So we are wondering, and you will tell us, what is Iceland doing right to be #1 in the world? We're going to speak with politicians, the academics, and professor about the global gender gap, about stereotypes, about sexism in politics, about good and bad practice, and what can be done to improve things, to get more women involved in politics, more active. The event was put together, some protocol. It's a joint effort of the partners of the project Meta Dekleta, institutes Metas List, Avante LAHKO, Vita Activa, and the Icelandic Women's Rights Association, the Managers Association of Slovenia, and Students Organization of the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana. I would also like to thank the Faculty of Arts for hosting the event, for kindly offering us the blue room, in Slovenian modra soba. The blue refers in Slovenia as modern, smart. Hopefully you will hear some smart things on this conference. There are smart ladies here, and I'm sure we're going to have a great time. Now let me introduce you to our panelists. Start with Iceland. And please excuse me if I will pronounce your last names a bit different than you are pronouncing them. Porum Sveinbjarnardóttir, was that okay? Close. She is the executive director of the Social Democratic Alliance Party of Iceland, former Minister for the Environment, and former member of Original Women's Platform. That was all-women party which sat in parliament. And tell us, please, welcome to Slovenia. Thank you. The weather is a bit different, right?
No, it's just the same.
It's a bit warmer now.
No, it's we had snow when I left, but Iceland is not as cold as its reputation.
Okay, we're going to speak about stereotypes today.
Yeah.
Talking about stereotypes. What do people who are not from Iceland think about Iceland? What are the stereotypes that are usually associated with Iceland but you hate and are not true?
One which is close in time and history is it's more of a myth than a stereotype. It's the myth that Iceland got out of the financial crash, our financial collapse, without any cost or very little cost to the population. This is wrong. We have paid dearly, both in taxes, in cutting our income and the rest of it. I won't start because I could talk all day about the financial collapse. But it seems there is a story going on in Europe that we put all the bankers in jail and the general population didn't have to pay a cent. I'm sorry, but it's wrong. Yeah, just put you on, let's start here.
Let's start here. Okay, then Brynhildur Heidardóttir. Okay, when we talked over Skype, I was practicing her last name. The whole last name is Heider Ómarsdóttir.
Yes.
She was saying, "Oh, just call us by our first names. That's the custom in Iceland." Because it's not a customary thing in Slovenia, would be sort of disrespectful, but not in Iceland.
No, we don't have family names. We have patronymic and matronymic names. So, for example, my name is.
Could you press?
Wait. Yeah. So my name. We don't have family names in Iceland. We have patronymic and matronymic names. So my name is Brynhildr, daughter of Heather and daughter of Omar. Heather and Omar's daughter, and Thorin is Thorin, daughter of Sveinbjörn. And so if you go to Iceland and if you have to find somebody and you look into the phone book, you look under the first name because we're there under our first names. So.
Okay, Brynhildr is executive manager of Icelandic Women's Rights Association and also a trained literary critic and hosts shows on the Icelandic national radio.
Yeah.
Okay, then let me continue with the Slovenian part of the conference. Katarina Kresal, welcoming you at the conference. Katarina is the founder of European Center for Dispute Resolution, former Minister of the Interior, and former President of the Liberal Democracy of Slovenia. Now, you left politics a couple of years ago. I guess you miss it.
The fuss around it, the chaos, not
the ups and downs, the adrenaline.
Not at all, but yes, the projects, the people, the way of work, because if you do politics correctly, then that's a good work to do. It's tough, you have to be well organized, you have to have a good team of people, and that's what I miss. I could do that again, but I definitely don't miss politics as it is now, because it was quite the same 3 years ago when I left. With all the surrounding echoes and all the supportive media and very nice colleagues. I don't miss that actually.
No, but don't regret the exit out of politics. Would you consider coming back at some point?
I don't know what's with people, but they keep on asking me this. I don't know. No, I'm not considering it now, not at all, because the European Center for Dispute Resolution is, for me at the moment, such a challenge. It develops so nicely that I really am completely into it. I do follow politics, of course. I am homo politicus. I always was. That's why I went into politics, and I try not to be too critic and not to be taking too personally what happens. But of course, it's all around us, so we have to take it personally. I never regret anything in my life, so I do not regret getting in, neither getting out. But what the future will bring, who knows?
I will totally challenge you today to be critical. Then Mojca Kleva-Kekuš, she's a former EU parliamentarian and a member of the Social Democrats Party. Mojca, you've been many years closely involved in Slovenian politics, then tasted the EU level for a couple of years. Where are you now? What's your status? You gave birth at the beginning of this year.
Yeah, this was the first challenge to become a mother. Maybe a bigger challenge than being a politician, at least time-wise. No, I finished my mandate in July as a member of the European Parliament, and I do miss this job. I really do it. I like the fuss of compromising amendments. I love the fuss of to be critical towards the European Commission and to the member states. And I do miss it actually, but it's only 4 or 5 months after that. So maybe Katarina had at least a couple of years, so maybe this will come. The regret will still come, but I do see myself in politics in a couple of years. If I think now, I don't know. But the true fact is that for a younger, or I'm not younger anymore, but a new mother is definitely a challenge to stay in politics. You could see in the result from the Slovenian politics how many women are sitting in the Slovenian parliament with children age 5 years and less. No? I don't know if there is any. So basically maybe the Slovenian ideas of coming back to work too early or too late as a politician is just not working. I came back after 6 weeks and I got all the critics because
because I really had something important in the parliament. I wanted to attend the meeting when we were discussing the multinationals and how to how to put a taxation on their work. And I really thought this is like the thing I need to be, and then I got all the critics because I came too early. But I guess if I would stay at home 6 months, they would say that I came too late and I should give my mandate back. That's the rumors that were running around at that time. So whatever I did wasn't right at that time. So, but I'm sure we will discuss this.
You were criticized for that. Was that within the party lines or?
Yeah, first in the party lines, definitely. Because we were just putting together the list for the new European Parliament. And, but also in the media as well. Especially female journalists were a bit critical. Not all of them publicly. Some were telling this off the record. But yeah, I got quite a lot of critics from the media as well.
Thank you.
That's true.
And Professor Milica Antić-Gaber, she's a sociologist, activist, and definitely one of the leading experts on women in politics and feminist political theory. Professor Antić-Gaber, we had 3 big elections this year. I assume a lot of work for you. What do you see are the trends? Is it looking good or better for women than in previous cycles, or are you optimistic or not really?
If I'm thinking about the numbers, it's definitely looking better. And the gender quota proves to be successful in Slovenian case. It proved, as Drew Dedalo would say, the fast track to equality in politics. When we go back into the history, we see that we had only 7.8% of women in national parliament in 1996. Only 11.4% of female local councillors in 1998, and now we have at all three levels more than 30% of women. That means that gender quota make it through, but this is only the critical mass. This is only the first stage in what we have to do in politics. So now we have to think further, not only in the context of numbers, but only about what exactly changed after so many women entered the politics. So what they are doing there, what issues they bring into the politics, how do they respond to the expectations of the women who are outside the institutional politics, how can they cooperate, what can they do together, etc., etc. So there are so many things to have to be discussed and done in politics.
And you will talk a bit about it shortly. Let me introduce myself. My name is Natasha Briškin. I am the co-founder and editor-in-chief at Metina Lista and the project leader of Meta Dekleta. The important part of our project was the empirical research, trying to find the reasons that women do not enter politics as often or as willingly as men. And Professor Antić-Gaber was at the head of the research. Now please tell us, what are the results?
First of all, I'd like to tell you why we've done this research. I've been researching with colleagues of mine, women in politics, for more than 2 decades. And about more than 2 decades. What is going on here? And we've been, when we've discussed the situation in Slovenia and the issue of women in politics, we found out that there are there should be obstacles before women, the women that want to enter the politics, as we have the situation in Slovenia that we have so many highly educated women. They are also employed in a very equal share with men. Our gender pay gap is one of the smallest in Europe, etc., etc. And then we are asking why there are so few women in politics. So there should be some obstacles when women want to enter into the institutional politics. That's why we were asking, and there are also so few young women in politics as well. So when we were trying to find the answers to this question, we wanted to see what young women themselves think about this. We put together the questionnaire and we asked them several questions. We want to see how they perceive politics. Do they have any interest in politics? Do they follow politics? How they are engaged in politics, etc. So what we found out is that young women are interested in politics. That only 15% of young women, I should say, that we consider young women and men, the people who are under 40s. So when we ask, we don't want to limit, to the 30s because they are still in the schools at the time, some of them. So we found out that only 15% of young women under 40 answered that they do not have any interest in politics. 75% they said they do have interest in politics. Young women also follow the media, and they follow the politics in media. 48% of young women spend more than 3 hours per week following the news in politics. When we asked them what issue interests them, they said that social issues are on the first on the scale, discrimination and human rights on the second place, and issues concerning young people on the third place. They are also actively involved in politics. They do go to vote more often than their male counterparts, but they are the way they are mobilized in politics is different from the one from men, and I will show you this later. So when they were asked how they are engaged in politics, you see that they are engaged in alternative politics more successfully than men. They more often sign a petition, they more often boycott consumer products, they take part in demonstrations, but they do not involve in a very high share in the institutional politics. There are not that many in political party meetings. They don't involve they do not contact, for example, a politician and say what they think about the actual political situation. When we asked why this is so, we found that more young women than young men see politics as a dirty business. So this may be an answer why they don't involve in institutional politics, but they prefer to go to the alternative kind of involvement, as I've said before. And we established that such perception pushes young women in more passive position. They restrain themselves from engaging in politics, especially institutionalized politics. As the consequence, there are more young men than women members of political parties. we also find out that young women rarely plan and systematically and deliberately develop their political career. They rarely decide for candidacy on their own. They wait to be invited to come to work into the politics. In general, they need to be addressed and invited by highly positioned politicians, and in general they need strong support not only in the public sphere but also in the private one among the members of the family. When they were asked what are the main obstacles when they are discussing entering into the politics or be more active in politics, they say that they feel a lack of self-confidence. They don't want to expose themselves into the public. And they also, what was really surprising to us, because they're really young women, they see problems with balancing private life and professional life. On the general level, what are the obstacles they see? And if you see this table, you see that the most they see the problem in the men's network. They see the problem in the, let's say, party safeguards. They don't.
Well, definitely was not adequately prepared for the hearing, but it seemed to me, it reminded me a little bit of the last days of Katarina Kristal in politics. She got not criticized, not hammered, but beyond. She got like the double dose. Have you seen, could you see any parallels in this?
Not really, because with me it lasted years. Alenka had a week, so but she got it tough. I mean, that was beyond something ever seen before. I will not go into it whether she was adequate for that or not, but we would never ever see something like that with a man. Never. A separate political issue that comes up with this is, what kind of a state are we to throw away position like Vice President of the European Commission, to throw away a candidate that we actually completely legally elected, however we did it. It was done like many times before, or at least 2 times before, because we would have commissioners more than that. What kind of rage this must have been to throw all this away, to disgrace your country so much. There was a lot of help from Slovenia so that it came out like this, just to erase a certain woman. That's a huge political issue to discuss. Not just the fact that she was a woman, but how can certain rage be so big towards any politician that you minimize your country in the eyes of others so much as we did. I think it was unbelievable, and it would be worth a separate conference on what we are, what is our future, how we see politics, how we see Slovenia in EU, because we have not been for 10 years interested in European Union. We have never listened to hearings of the Commissioner. We don't care as Mr. Potočnik did in EU. Never, ever cared until that moment that we realized that all this big money Alenka Bratušek will be making. And that's not okay. Let's set aside her presence there. We have a woman commissioner.
There is yes.
But she's not vice president. She doesn't have energetic sector. And by the way, because we did all this, we missed all the possibility to put our people in the commissioners' cabinets.
Other cabinets, yes.
We came out so stupid, really. Now we have a woman, but that's the only good thing. I think we have a capable woman, but that's not enough. We should have had much, much more. But coming back to me and my really eclectic experience with politics, that's the part I don't miss. You know, the politics itself. I can understand why I like it, because it's so wonderful. wonderful occupation, and it said in there in your research that it's dirty. Politics is the cleanest profession of ever if it's done correctly. And it is done from the noblest qualities. It's managing public affairs. That should be done by the most wise people with the most experience, and it should be done for the greater good. But of course, in years and years, we completely molested it, and it's become a fight for power. And that's what it is, and that's what it is in Slovenia for the last 10 years. It's terrible, and it goes more and more. How do we women fit in here? Why did I get whatever I got? From the beginning, of course, because I was new and because I was a woman. It was really funny because everybody was expecting new faces. I was the first really new face in politics, coming from outside, being young, being decently something, you know. And all of this was disadvantage for me, which was the first surprise, for me. But later on, you know, firstly, my colleagues were really fun. You know, they were all men. I was the only female, the first female president actually of the party in Slovenia. And they were like, the little one, you know, little one. They were like really, I'm something higher than you are and so on. It didn't last long because you can't really be very nasty to somebody that knows so much more than you do and have so much more experience than they do. So we cleared that up pretty quickly. After 1 year, media started to listen what I was saying, and then things went well. When I came to the ministry, in 1 month they were completely clear how I work and how I do, so I was clear in the ministry. So I really did not have problems because I was a woman, but my womanhood did help them to criticize me when it came so far that was opportunities. Because being a woman opens the gates for such incredible critics that men don't get. We could see that with Alenka now. It starts from how you look, how you're dressed, which earrings do you wear, with whom you sleep, you know, how you live, how much you have earned. These are the questions that are never asked for the men. But I don't believe that I was hammered like I was just because I was a woman. I think I was hammered because I was too powerful politician, and because the third pole were starting to form around me. We have the right and we have the left. I didn't fit anywhere because I didn't come from any part, and I'm a liberal, I'm something completely different. So a completely different crowd started to form around me, and that was becoming too much of a threat for male and at least female politicians in these two poles. That's why I think I was so much hammered, but of course being a woman was very helpful with all sorts of things you don't hear with men. Also I had to hear this actually in our Slovenian parliament. I don't know if you remember, you most probably do. When I had my second interpellation, was that there was a man and he stood up and when he was really trying to find words to really minimize me, to really show how bad I am. And she said, and she's not a real woman, she does not have any children. And I was like, what? And then I could see the men and they were like, what? It was too much even for men. You know, for some men, of course. But that was some achievement because when he tried to find something that really showed how bad person I was, it was because I didn't have family, I didn't have children, I still don't have children. And I keep on getting asked this question, even though it's completely personal, and there's many, many reasons why people don't have children, and I still find it offensive when they ask me.
A question of how do you balance family and career, right? Many times asked, mostly only female politicians get a question like this. When we were talking about the double standards, it reminded me of something that a woman said. She was nominated for first woman nominated for important ambassadorial post abroad. She said, because I am a woman, I have to be twice as good. Because if I don't do the job right, they will not say she was not competent. They will say women are not competent. You had the first prime minister in Iceland was Johanna, help me with the last name, Sigurðardóttir, and she guided Iceland through very difficult times. Obviously, some measures were rightly taken, and Iceland is not where it was a couple of years ago, even though there are still challenges. But please tell us a bit. Her partner wrote a book about the private life when you are with a person on highly political post.
Right. So Johannes' partner her name is Jónína Leósdóttir, and what's actually really interesting is that it was never an issue in Iceland that Jóhanna was a lesbian. In fact, I didn't even realize she was a lesbian until she was elected prime minister. You know, she'd been in a relationship with Jónína for a decade at that point. And it only really became an issue when the foreign media noticed it, because it was Jóhanna is a very, very private person, and it probably comes from she is a very experienced politician. She belongs to Thorin's party, and she was actually she's been in parliament for a long time, and she was actually in parliament when there were only 3 women in parliament. So you can imagine sort of like what she had to face, but. What she did post-collapse, and this is actually, I want to sort of like pick up on the idea of political rage against women, and how it sort of like is manifested in Iceland. I mean, as you probably are aware, Iceland had a catastrophic financial collapse in 2008. It was just absolutely devastating. All of our banks collapsed. It was we're still sort of like we're still, as Thorin said, trying to find our way through these just financial implications of this. What was really interesting post-collapse, sort of like, we needed to reevaluate what made us a society, sort of like what had happened. And they came out with a very, they formed a committee, sort of like a committee was formed, which is never the start of a good news actually story when you say, oh, a committee was formed, but this was a very good committee. They basically went over what had happened in Iceland. And what they found was that this was a gendered collapse. This was a masculine collapse. That all the banks, all the people running the banks, all the politicians who were in charge of the financial matters were men. Women were not allowed into these operations. So in a way, it was a gendered financial collapse, which made the Icelandic population more receptive towards, we need to have female politicians. And what in fact turned out in the election in 2009. You were now in parliament around 30% female. Yeah, we were around 30% women for over a decade. We basically stopped there. We could never break that glass ceiling. It took this catastrophic financial collapse that suddenly people were willing to vote for women to sort of like clean up parliament. Let's vote for women. But parallel to this, parallel to the idea that women will come and save us, you had this idea that. At the same time, and this is this opposite idea that women are the only ones who will take the blame. So, in post the financial collapse, the only people who actually resigned from parliament, the people that sort of like gave up politics, were women. The men are still active in politics, and they're still sitting in parliament, and they were not hounded out of politics as several of these women were. And but to move the conversation forward, I became sort of like a radically power-hungry feminist post the financial collapse when we finally broke the glass ceiling. Before that time, I'm a trained literary critic. I'm not trained in politics. I was, this typical postmodern sort of like, reading the gendered discourse and sort of like thinking, if we only fix the gender ratio in Hollywood, things will be fine. But, what happened? We voted sort of like suddenly the Icelandic parliament was 45% women. And what happened? We had these fantastic legislation that was passed in the next 4 years. We had laws that outlawed prostitution. That is, prostitutes, to be a prostitute is not illegal. They are never punished. They are never arrested. But it's illegal to purchase prostitution. Only the customers are. It's illegal to profit from the nudity of your employees. i.e. sort of like stripping is illegal in Iceland. We legislated like the Austrian methods, sort of like, you know, more radical ways of fighting, you know, domestic violence. Now this was done, and I realized like this is happening because, you know, you've reached the critical mass of women in parliament from all, you know, sides that agree on these issues. And, you know, at this point, that's when I became a power-hungry feminist. I realized, you know, once we have the power, we actually can change society. I guess I want to end after my power-hungry declaration. But I definitely want to also discuss maternity leaves and paternity leaves, because I do think that's also a very, very important point.
Because that was one of the reasons that the research shows, the paternity and maternity leave, that younger women see as a challenge to overcome. You know, when they have families, it looks like younger women are the ones that are dealing with this sort of issue. What were measures that you took, or what would you advise to do?
Okay.
How to include more younger women?
Well, as I understand it, the participation of women in the labor market in Slovenia is very high, right? The same goes for Iceland, and we still have the second shift, the double burden for very many women, much too many. And Icelandic women actually still have a lot of children. I mean, we have more children than most of the women in Europe, save Turkey and Albania, I think. And the reason is not that Icelandic women are particularly fertile, because we have contraception and all that. The reason is that it's culturally accepted to have children and to have a job, or even to have children while at university, which is an Icelandic special. Anyway, but which in many other countries would be unthinkable, because there are no social structures for that. It is also just on the private front. It's also that we have, being a fairly young nation, we also expect. We still have the remnants of the big family structure, of grandparents not living with the family but helping out. Icelandic grandparents take care of the shuttle between school and sports and, you know, if you have children, it's a big shuttle business. You need to get them to places and pick them up and all that. Unless you live in a very well organized town where everything is at the same place, which usually doesn't happen. But the key here is participation in the labor market. So the legislation from the year 2000, which was actually passed unanimously in the Icelandic parliament, it was brought forth by the conservatives, and the key was to get the employers' organization and the trade unions in on it, because the right to maternity and paternity leave ties in with your rights in the labor market. So, and it's also secondary. Secondary is the right for mother and father to have time with a young child or a newborn. And also there you have the rights of children are addressed in a different legislation. You also have a different legislation that says children have the right to having, you know, both access and the care of both parents, basically as a human right. So what happens is that when you put the legislation, when you tie it in with the labor market, and we still have, I mean, it's only 9 months, which is not a lot in the North European, you know, context, but it is 9 months. And 3 months are exclusively for the woman, 3 months are exclusively for the man, and 6 months can, no, 3 months, sorry, I'm adding, 3 months can be divided. In practice, it's usually 6 plus 3. the woman usually takes 6. Not always, there are different, but in general this is what. But what happens is that the woman cannot take the 3 months, it's not something you can sell, it's not a quota you can get rid of, you know, in the market or somewhere. So if the man doesn't use his 3 months, they're gone. Therefore, if you have 2 parents, which of course you don't always have, but if you have 2 parents, they can share, and they can share 50-50 if they want to. What happened was that this made men, younger men especially, I mean, we joked about the fact that, of course, I mean, biologically, I mean, men can have children until they drop dead. But, which makes for a different social conversation about, you know, pensioners and, you know, paternity leave, but I won't get there now. But we'll get quoted for that. Yes, we'll get a quota for that as well. No, but seriously, the fact, what happened was, what was the most important effect in society was that when you hired a woman below the age of 40, even if women are having children in their 40s, in Iceland and in other countries, you couldn't say, "Oh, well, I can't hire her. She'll have kids. You know, she'll be in and out of the firm or whatever." The same could happen with a man, even if it's only 3 months. And therefore, you kind of devalued the significance of men in the labor market, and brought them closer together, the men and women in the labor market. And what happens is that most men, not all men, but most men have actually taken this to heart, and they use their paternity leave. It has gone down since the financial collapse, and it's mostly for economic reasons. And it's because you have, it's an index, you don't get paid 100% of your salary. And that's another huge debate. It used to be like that in the early years, because we were in a boom and we had lots of money, we thought. And then, you know, we don't have it anymore. So you really actually had to cut it down. And immediately it has the effect that there are fewer men who actually take the paternity leave because it's an economic matter. Whereas a woman will take a huge cut in her salary to stay at home for 6 months. A huge cut, and they do it. So this sort of changed the field, it sort of changed the playing field when it came to, you know, you're just out of university, you're in your first job, you want a career, having a child will not end your life or career. It'll slow it down, it slows it down for everyone, I think. But that's just life, you know. But it makes, you're not the only one there, you're not the only one in that situation. And society is prepared to compensate or participate in the cost of having children. But a society that doesn't have any children won't last for long, okay? So there you go. I mean, and if you don't have children and you live in a xenophobic society, 100 years from now you won't be here. So you'll all be old people and there will be no children. I'm serious, I'm not joking. This is the state of Europe as we know it. It's old and aging. And so we need to decide what we're going to do. Are we going to have the children, or
place women high on the list, on the right places on the list for the election? They see the problem in the media, already mentioned, that they are more critical towards women than towards men. So when we were discussing the problems on the general level, we don't see much of a difference among younger or among women who are already in the politics. Before the beginning.
I know you've been researching these numbers for decades, but was there anything in the research that surprised you, sort of? What was the biggest surprise for you? For me, certainly it was that women are very much active, just they show their activities differently as men do.
What was surprising to me when we saw the results was the fact that they are so aware of the expectation of the larger community. They see that the expectation towards young women is to care about family, and they see it now that this will be a difficulty when they will, discuss whether to, stay at home and brought children, or to enter into the politics. So they are quite aware of the traditional expectation of society, and this is different towards women and towards men, despite the fact that they are still young. This is one fact, and the other is they are quite aware of the situation in not only in the institutional politics and the party politics, but also among alternative organization in everyday life, in their activities among students, that they see these not only old boys networks, but also young boys networks. And they see this as a problem because they can't break through, because they're not that well organized. They mainly care about their studies, if they are entering already in the profession, how they can develop their professions. And they don't see that it's very important to have their own social networks in which they can engage and support each other. This, I think, is the area they have to think more about.
When talking about the younger, I barely made the cut. Katarina, Mojca, does it ring a bell what you heard about the results? You were, not the academia, working in academia, but the practice was your field. Does it surprise you? Question for both of you.
The younger one, sure.
I'm in by
older
definition,
now.
I'm in the younger generation. Yeah, definitely. I have to tell you a short story. When I became a member of the European Parliament, I started to get all the applications for assistance, or for stage, or whatever job I could offer in the European Parliament. 90% of the CVs I got were men. And I was reading I'm a feminist, I'm a feminist for long years, and I really wanted to give a chance to some women, because I was a member of the Committee for Women's Rights in the European Parliament, and I think that was really a challenge for younger women to maybe to give them a chance to get into gender equality issues a bit closer in the Parliament. I was looking really for a profile, a young girl or girls that would enter, that would come to work for me. But 90% were men. Okay, more than half of them were from all over Europe, because Slovenians are not really proactive in just writing to politicians. One of the results of the study. Then I started to promote a little bit what I was doing on the gender equality and women's rights, and then it completely changed. So I think I really do believe that I started to get CVs, and there were every 2-3 months I got someone new. I also had men, of course, younger men, but they were more interested in the fiscal policies and economy and so on and so on. But the fact is that I think it's definitely true that women are a bit more. They want to work on things that they think they're very close to their beliefs, their way of life, or how they feel in this society. That's why, for me, it is not actually a surprise. In practice, it worked like that. I have to say, I had a couple of young women that were coming to work for me, and they were brilliant, were excellent, and I was offering them to stay a bit longer. All of them wanted to come back because they had boyfriends or families. They were really challenged with the job in the European institutions, or in the Parliament or Commission, whatever, but they felt like they belonged back home. With men, never. I had like half-half. When I was given the same chance to the boys, of course they said yes in the first moment, because I helped them to get other stage or some other jobs in Brussels. So, but girls really, I couldn't believe that they all wanted to come back. I was like, how? With all this unemployment, you think that everyone would love to have an experience abroad, but they had this feeling of having the priorities back home with family and boyfriends and so on. It was really, really responsible Slovenian girls that got to work for me in the European Parliament. So yeah, I wouldn't believe in the results.
It was interesting to see the definition how women go to politics. It was like, I did it, I had to be invited. Of course, I was interested. I had to be supported, and so on. So it's really like this because why? It's not. But issues, women and politics, it's like hundreds of years old, like the politics itself. The problem is that the politics was organized by men, and it works under the rules of the men. I mean, of course, who gets there first, defines the rules. That's why it is so hard to enter for the women. That's why they want to be invited. They want to feel that somebody needs them. They need to be given the position. They need to be supported. And there's a lot of women that are interested in politics, like you discovered in your in this research. But it's the best or the most that we can do to change the rules is that the women change it, because the men will not change it. 5 years ago, it was absolutely absurd to have a woman for the Ministry of the Interior, or for the Ministry of the Defense, or for the Prime Minister. In 5 years, everything changed. Because if at a certain point you are like an exotic plant, what is this? We don't know how it works. Is it healing? Is it, can it cause death? Or what the hell will happen with a woman? And then you have it there. Some are good, some are bad, like men. You cannot say that men are predisposed to be in politics and women are not. It's such something.
Yes.
And if you can only see how these plants work if you plant them there. And I know when I was the head of the Ministry of Interior, we raised the number of women in police for, 100%. And we got the first vice chief of police woman. And all the rest, and we opened the issues of women and domestic violence and so on. And it stayed there, and it made a change. And afterwards, when the next female minister came, it wasn't such a big, exotic thing. Maybe she will do better, maybe she will do the same or worse. It doesn't really matter because you have to give a chance, and that's what we don't do. I was given a chance in really strange times when nobody else wanted to do it. But once I was given a chance, I was really supported in my party, with my colleagues. It was never a problem that I was a woman. It was more of a problem for others, for media especially. I remember one of the older, really experienced journalists. She said to me after she got used to me after 1 year or something. She said, you have to really understand, but it was so exotic for you to come. You were from outside, you were a woman. How dares she enter into this circle that she doesn't know? How dare she? That were her words, and she was saying it to me really frankly, like, I'm sorry, I apologize for that, but that's how it is. And it's coming from female journalists, that was really shocking for me. But more and more women go in, the less and less this will be.
We will touch upon women's solidarity in politics, but yes, the change is probably only possible from the inside. You have to come in and start changing things. From the outside, we can only be as loud. Now, let's go to Iceland. Bryn, if maybe you could start, the state of women in Iceland. The American president has every year in January, I think, the State of the Union. The state of women in Iceland.
Right, yeah, Bryn's State of Iceland. I feel like I'm here under false pretenses. You're absolutely correct that we've had, for I guess 5 years running, we've had the smallest gender gap in Iceland. But I feel that it says less about how good the situation is in Iceland and more about how bad the situation is in the rest of the world. Because, to be fair, I was looking at the number of ministers here in Slovenia, and I saw you have 7 female ministers out of 17, that's just over 40%. We have 3 out of 9, 33%, and we almost lost one of the female ones last week, so at which point we would have gone below 30, which would have been catastrophic. However, we do have many things that I'm very eager to discuss about politics. Iceland is a bit of a special case. We have a long history of women's states, women coming together and founding their own parties and running both for municipal elections and for national elections. And Thorun is a member of one of these parties that ran, and her party was they ran for office first in 1983, and they basically sort of like still remain in parliament, members that started in the Women's Alliance. I work for an organization called the Icelandic Women's Rights Association. It was founded in 1907 to fight for women's suffrage, for the right to vote. And it was a very explicitly political organization, and in fact the first female slate, or first women's slates, sprang up from that organization. So women actually came together in 1907 to run for the first time as a women's party, and they won, sort of like, they became the majority party in the government of Reykjavik in 1907, which might explain why women's slates have become so popular in Iceland, because we had this fantastic success in 1907, and it sort of like, paved the way. Again, these are very specific circumstances and not replicable. We don't have quotas in Iceland. We've never had gender quotas, and we've managed to get where we are without gender quotas. And I'm actually very eager to hear about how gender quotas work here in Slovenia. However, the different parties do have different ways. They do have institutionalized quotas, and Thorun can tell you all about that. I want to hear, but before I give this word to Thorun, I want to emphasize, though, that I'm here in a panel with 3 extremely talented politicians and a professor studying politics, and so I'm going to be the voice for the third sector, the voluntary sector, because I work for an organization, a non-profit or non-governmental organization, a very old one. We will be celebrating our 108th year anniversary next year. It is extremely important for a civilized society to have a very strong civil societies that are very focused on politics, especially politics of equality. And it's been a blessing for Iceland that we have the Icelandic Women's Rights Associations and other civil societies that are women's organizations that are very political, that have been sort of like fighting for the women's political participation. And what I guess sets my organization apart from the rest is that our organization, and this has been this has been very controversial, our organization is cross-political. It runs across political lines. So our unofficial motto is that we are highly political, but across party lines, and which means that I have to work with everyone, even sort of like people from parties that I really don't agree with. And this has been sort of like it's hard. We have many fights, but it does sort of like cut down on. I personally have belonged to several grassroots feminist organizations, and I'm sure many of you have belonged to at least 1 or 2 groups. What tends to happen within these groups is that I like to joke about this idea about the personal is political. Well, it means that the political can become pretty darn personal. So somebody does something, and your colleagues start hating you for it, and I have had that experience that people stumble. That these feminist groups tend to splinter up into factions and start talking to each other and just going, wait, what? But now working in an organization that's sort of like says, well, we can't take politics personally, because even if we come from these different directions, we're all working for the same thing, and that's the equality in our country. That's sort of like, I think that's something special, and that's worth preserving.
Bryn, what I found very useful when Meta de Kleta visited Reykjavik in May this year was exactly what you were saying. The Icelandic Women's Organization was established in 1907, so it's more than 100 years old. And your headquarters are in a building where some other women's rights organizations are. It eases the communication, sort of. I think that's very good. Would you say it works for you?
Yeah, it definitely works for us, and this is actually now the only building left in the ownership of the women's movement in Iceland. And we have this huge building in the middle of Reykjavik, and we actually started fundraising for it in 1922, and it took 45 years. It opened up in 1967. And the only way we can sort of like maintain it now is that we rent out office space to 2 embassies, but that money we use to sort of like give offices to grassroots organizations, and there have been other buildings in Iceland, but it definitely helps to have some sort of like a kernel there that
under one roof.
Yeah, under one roof.
Yeah. Okay, Portland. So World Economic Forum showed that the difference between men and women is the smallest in Iceland. What do you think were the steps in the right direction?
There are many steps in the right direction, and maybe first of all, it's important to realize that this takes time, and it's an ongoing struggle, and in Iceland, women are told that everything is set and we have finished, the women's revolution has finished, right? Everything is as it should be. And it's not, and it's just another way of both controlling the debate and oppressing women, to use old Marxist terms. Indexes are good. The World Economic Forum index tells us a story. But it tells a particular story, like the Human Development Index tells us a slightly different story, but also a very important story. And I think it's important, coming from, it's easy to talk like that when you've been ranked at the top for, 6 years in a row or something like that. But don't be fooled by the indexes. They are good. They're good for comparisons. But like Brynhildur said, maybe they just tell us that it should be a lot better in general if it's only this good in Iceland. And we are also very aware of the fact that being ranked top can make you very complacent and self-assured and sort of saying like, okay, and it's been said, it's being said more by men than women in Iceland that, hey, we rank top and this is it. But also because there are it can be changed so suddenly. It's so precocious. It's a very, everything that has to do with human rights and women's rights can be taken back with almost a strike of the pen. And we all know this, and it happens all the time, all over the world. So that's what you have to be mindful of. You can look at the statistics and say, okay, this is great, you're doing well here, you could do better here, and it's good for comparison, and it's good to learn from one country to another. But I think you always have to be very mindful of the fact that this is not set in stone. All of this can be taken back in one election, 2 elections. We're only one, some people say we're 2 elections away from fascism in all European countries. And I think it's very, very correct. I think it's something that we don't like to think about it because it's kind of what we had thought we had left in the past. But lo and behold, there is a deep economic recession, a global recession, and what happens? The impact on politics is what it has always been. It's xenophobia and fascism. And that's bad news for women. It's not only bad news for those who are others, it's very bad news for women as well, because they are others when push comes to shove. How did we get there? We started with the Women's Rights Association in 1907. Icelandic women got the right to vote in 1915. We're having a great celebration next year. It has to be a 5-year celebration because in 1915, 40-year-old women and older were allowed to vote. The rest were still, just couldn't do it. And in 1920 it was a general, so we should be celebrating 1920, not 1915, but there you go. We celebrated step by step. What happened in Iceland was, like Bryn said, we had a women's platform in 1908 in the municipal elections in the town of Reykjavik, the city of Reykjavik, which won a landslide. They ran on social welfare, they ran on
affairs and equal opportunities, which sucked in the pre-existing Office for Equal Opportunities, who was a self-standing office. And I have a question for our Icelandic colleagues. I will abuse you a little bit. Yeah. So you said that the financial collapse was very gendered, and we know which gender collapsed it, yeah? So, and furthermore, you said that the myth is broken about who paid for the crisis, so it was general population. Was the paying for the crisis also gendered? I mean, is it women who bear the consequences of the crisis? We know that generally it is women who suffer more from the crisis, from economic crisis and so on. So how was it, or is it in Iceland, if you have some information?
I would say that what we managed to do in Iceland, in the government that came in 2009, early 2009, the collapse was in the fall of 2008, and there was a lot of turmoil, demonstrations and whatnot, and early elections. So we had the Social Democratic Alliance and the Left Greens with a majority. For the first time in history in Iceland, we had a left government after this collapse. We took utmost care to make sure that those in the, one could say, the lowest 25% of the income earning in society, I'm searching for the right word here, would be not entirely shielded, but this was the group in society that we said, okay, we're not taking away their benefits, we're not increasing their taxes, we're making sure that they are not worse off than they are right now. Basically the poorest people in Iceland. And many in this section of society are women. They're older women and they are single mothers, as everywhere else. But there was also a lot of men. And so it was not, I mean, yes, the gendered thought was there, but what we were mostly thinking was that we want to try and ease sort of the shock on everyone. Because what we had to do in government was we had to increase taxes and really cut, fiscal spending. It was brutal what we had to do. We had an IMF program. We had to bring in the International Monetary Fund, which was the only way we could get, loans needed from abroad. We had and we have a collapsed currency. We have capital controls, and we had on average we could say that the average Icelander took probably around 20 to 30% cut in their living standard. But we had a very high living standard. So even if you have more, you had more relative poverty, to speak, what we tried to make sure in those 4 years in government was that we would not, sort of put more on the groups that are most vulnerable than they could deal with. And I think we actually managed to do that. I mean, it wasn't easy, and there was a lot of debate, and really, the prioritizing within the budget and all that. But we managed to do it because we had a social democratic view of what we wanted to do. We still have to see. I mean, the research is not in. I mean, we really need to research the gendered effect of the financial collapse. I mean, what I could say something would just be guesswork, but I'm sure there is. But in general, because we tried to protect the most vulnerable groups in society, I think we actually managed to have a more gendered approach than maybe people realized when they did it.
I just want to add as a non-governmental, I guess, sort of like, because she was obviously a part of the Women Coalition at the time. I mean, we were very happy, as a feminist, I was very happy with the response to the collapse, because what they also tried to do for the first time is that they tried to use feminism and gendered ideas to alleviate the effects, right? So, for example, in 2012, they instituted the first gender budgeting, right, like that the budget of the government should go through a gender analysis to see sort of like what will be the effects of these specific policies. So I think that this approach definitely did alleviate the effects. I mean, as Thora said, they were and are painful. Women were and are affected. They are taking up. So, for example, if you have cuts in healthcare, so like who takes up the slack is the women, right? Like the patients go home and it's the women in the family that take care of them. But using gendered methods can definitely make things better.
Thank you very much. Ludovic van der Laan, I'm Vice President of the European Liberal Democrats, and I just wanted to start by saying it's a wonderful conference. Thank you very much. And when I moved to Slovenia 2 years ago, I asked 10 different people, I said, where are the funky progressive feminists in this country? And they all said, Natasha Brisky. That's the only answer. That's the only answer we had. In the meantime, luckily I found out there's a lot more, and a lot of them are at the table here. But I was really despairing. I said there must be someone more than Natasha. But thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
So I have 2 questions for our Icelandic friends and one for the Slovenian friends. The first is in Iceland. Can you tell us a little bit whether you think the education system, and also starting already in primary and going through secondary and university, has an effect on the much more feminist society, or egalitarian society that you have? Because Slovenia, of course, is a notorious education system which makes for very passive, hierarchically oriented people, which I'm sure doesn't, empower women a lot. And the second thing is, I would just want to bring a little bit of sex into this because it's about sexual, relations as well. It's very interesting that you've, criminalized the prostitution in the sense that the Johns get arrested. How does that work in the rest of society for sexual relations? Have you managed to desexualize male-female relations, and does that also have negative effects? You guys still having sex and all that. I mean, how does it? Are there any figures on that? Because I would find that very interesting as well. And then for the Slovenes, I wanted to ask my fellow liberal Katarina, whether you think that the socialist past of Slovenia, when it was still Yugoslavia, has had a good or a negative effect on gender equality, because sometimes I feel that there's a level of passivity that is never good for claiming your rights and for fighting for change and believing that you as an individual can make a difference, for which women pay a higher price. And at the same time, I think socialism had some kind of fiction of equality, and some things came out of it, like abortion rights and access to sexual reproductive rights, these kind of things, which put you ahead, I think, of other countries in the region. So I'm very interested to know about that. And of course, if the other Slovenes want to come in on that, that's fine too.
Yeah. Just quick info before we go to the answers. Mojca has some obligations to attend, and she will leave the conference. Thank you, Mojca, for attending.
Just one sentence.
Please.
I just want to say, it's a little secret, but I was saying, I'm a big fan of women that really made it through Slovenian politics. Slovenian politics is absolutely a male issue. Everything that's happening with the Slovenian politics is just deteriorating thing from year to year, and what I'm seeing now with all the Bratušek issue and everything that is happening in the last 6 months and what Katarina went through, I think is just, I don't think it can get worse. But I really hope, what I hope for the next couple of months or years is that the Slovenian political society will find time, energy, and ability to reinvent itself, and that women like Katrina will come back to the, or maybe myself as well, would come back to the Slovenian politics, because we can change things, and I saw it on the European level, and I think we can do it in Slovenia as well. Just one sentence regarding maternity leave. When I got pregnant, I started all the problems. There is a big book of the European Parliament saying about the rules and procedures and the statute of everything that you need to know about being a parliamentarian, and how to write amendments, when all the deadlines, everything is there. Not even a word about maternity leave or about pregnant women. So what happened to me is what I gave birth in January, and the end of January, and the mandate finished in May. If I wanted to take a maternity leave that in Belgium is 4 months, it's only 4 months, or in the institutions is 4 months, I would have to give back my mandate for the 4 months. That's why I went back in 6 weeks. But I needed to have a certificate from my doctor saying she needs to stay at home at least 6 weeks, because this is a healthy issue. So I have to go back to the President of the European Parliament saying, look, I have a certificate, because if you miss more sessions and more activities in the European Parliament, then you're not allowed to get salary, and then you're kicked out. You have to give back your mandate. So that is my... But on the other hand, we were at that time 3 pregnant parliamentarians, and on the other hand, on a practical way, there is a kindergarten in the parliament, there is all the system is built around, you can have children, but at least I managed to do that in the 4 or 5 months that I was dealing with this problem, that there is an article at the end of all this book with everything inside saying that a woman that is giving birth can miss so many plenary sessions with the certificate of the doctor. So it's a little step, and they will have to fight it in this mandate. They said, oh, there is your big fight for next mandate. Someone else will have to do it, some other pregnant woman, but it's the same in Slovenian parliament. When Melita Župevca, I'm sure the Slovenians know her, she was a member of the Slovenian parliament. When she gave birth, I'm not going to mention that the most important question was who was the father, all these stupid things, but if she would miss more than 3 sessions of the Slovenian National Assembly, she would have to give back her mandate. So she only stayed at home for 3 months. It's not fair that I'm talking about her, but we had a long discussion about that, and it's fact. So even the Slovenian legislation, I hope there will be some parliamentarians in Slovenia that will start to change that fact as well. I just believe more women with women problems coming to politics, there is a bigger chance that we can change something and keep up the fight, or in Iceland, or in Slovenia, or in the EU. I'm very sorry, but I have to leave. Because my daughter is sick, but I'm really happy that I have the chance to participate in this conference.
Thank you, Monica, for your contribution. Thanks. Thank you. Now let's go to the answers. Did you write down the questions?
We did, yeah. Okay. I'm going to tackle the school question and leave the sex for Thorin.
Once I'm older and wiser before.
Yes, absolutely. It was an extremely good question about the school system, because this has actually been my passion now for the past year, because in fact, in Iceland, there is a quiet revolution. Well, not really a quiet one. We are seeing the beginning of a feminist revolution among the younger generation. And it's thanks to the school system, and it's thanks to a grassroots organization of teachers. What happened 6 years ago in one of the gymnasiums, one of the high schools, one of the teachers started offering voluntary courses in feminism and gender studies. And it became so incredibly popular, right? Because obviously it's fun to sit in a class and talk about feminism and reading culture and looking at advertisements, and just teenagers are so receptive, like at the age of 16, 17, they just needed to have their eyes opened. In 5 years, this course has spread, and it's not through any organized action, but it's spread through over half of all the gymnasiums in Iceland. More than half of all gymnasiums in Iceland now offer a course in feminism. And what has happened is that within 3 years, the first feminist club of a gymnasium was founded. And now we have 1/3 of the schools the students have come together, organized and founded their own feminist clubs. And these, I've met these kids and they're passionate feminists, and they're not all girls, right? These are boys too. Maybe 1/3 of them are boys, right? Because feminism is basically a revolutionary act. So yes, the school system can have an effect. And this is basically, so like, this is my passion now, is that I want to have a feminist course in every single gymnasium, and in fact in every single elementary school. You know, why not have pink days in kindergarten, where like, you know, we talk with kindergartners about sort of like, you know, so housework, you know, mommy and daddy, what's going on? So, yeah.
Okay. Let me just, I want to say a little bit about education, if I can. We of course have a mandatory universal free education for everyone from the age of 6 to 16, and mostly, and most people go to what is a / high school, junior college for 3 or 4 years after that, and the participation is good, and we have in university now, I think the latest figures from the University of Iceland is that the ratio is closing to 7:3 for, I mean, you have 60 or 70% of the students in university are women. So women in Iceland are extremely well educated. And sometimes when I'm in a foul mood, I feel that we have all been deceived, because when I was growing up, I believed that all I needed was a good education and you know, equal pay, and the rest would just be it would be there. It's not like that. But what we have is a progressive, because you said something about a hierarchical education system, and I don't know what the education system here is like, but I think in Iceland it has moved away from the old type of teacher knows all, you shut up, I talk. And it's a progressive education system in many ways, and it's a very good education system in many ways. But of course, I mean, it has its ups and it has its downs. What is important about it now is that in the last 30 years we have managed to build a preschool system that was not intact. And that has become a very, very important element for equality among children and in the labor market. And I think that's probably one of our big achievements in Iceland, to have done that. So all children can go to preschool, and they basically all do.
From which age? Sorry, from which age?
From around 2, 1.5 to 2. We still have that gap between the maternity, paternity leave and preschool, so the idea is to close it, and then, you know, it should function properly. When it comes to sexual relations or the relations between men and women in Iceland, it's very, I mean, it's a very important and interesting debate, because in some parts of society you have a culture of men who actually had it with feminists. They hate them, they think they should be raped and put in their place. Simple as that, you know. And it's a subculture, and it's there. And it's what worries me is that it's kind of prevalent among younger men in their teens and their 20s. And then you have very, very progressive types that Bryn was describing, who are of the same age, and more people are there. You know, thankfully, more and more younger people are there. When it comes to, I think, equality in sexual relations, it's hard to say. I feel that many women and many men as well, many young men, and especially many younger women, are very, you know, have really feel the onus of being, you know, that they always need to be sexually prepared, and that they need to engage in all sorts of sexual activity. And that's a very, you know, that the only way to fit in is to be like that. And the pressure is definitely there. And it's very dangerous, you know, because it's also part of the, you know, the pornographic rape ideas of women. But then again, you have, because it is polarized, but then again you have very strong forces pushing against it. And there was a proposal in Alþingi in the parliament just last week, a proposal to legislate against what we call revenge porn. Which is basically, the internet is full, Snapchat you call it, social media, is full of, naked women, naked people, naked pictures taken without people's consent, all kinds of pictures. And it's just, when you think you've kind of finished that business, something else comes along and you really need to, work on that as well. So I feel that, yes, Icelandic women are emancipated when it comes to sexual relations, but there's a lot of pressure out there to be this or that way, to be accepted. There's a lot of social pressure out there, and a lot of it comes from media and social media.
Just a quick add-on. I think actually from my generation, I'm born in '78, and from my generation before, I guess the third wave sex positive, sort of like pornography is fine, it's very emancipated to be pro-pornography. What's really interesting when I speak with young people today, they're actually, in fact, because they are the children of the pornographic revolution, right? Like these are kids that have sort of like grown up, so they're with pornographic imagery, sort of like streaming on the internet, and they're very much against this, right? Like they are actually more progressive in the ways that they view pornography than many people of my generation. So that's also a very interesting point.
Mm-hmm. And the third question was for you, Katarina, and then we'll have to close the conference because you already have some meetings to attend, but we'll continue with the debates by coffee.
Socialism and women in Slovenia. To start with positive, I think it, in a way, to a certain extent, liberated women to combine family and business. It is normal in Slovenia for women to work and to have families all at the same time. Of course, there is a question how far can they go and how high can they go. But this is changing. I can see this is changing very rapidly. But this is the basic advantage that the system gave us. And I think this is a really positive thing. But the other thing that the system didn't give us, and that works for men and for women, is this, this wish to be successful, to be better, to outstand. This forced equality or sameness.
Such issues as teaching girls how to swim, because they were not taught to swim, only the boys were taught to swim. And then ran on major issues as fighting against alcoholism, which has always been a great women's movement, historically, struggle, and the need for a hospital in Iceland, which is one of the great achievements of the Icelandic women's movement. So these were very concrete, welfare issues, one could say, very important issues in society. The next time we had a women's platform, which was in 1982, in Reykjavik, in a town called Akureyri, also for municipal elections, most of the women who were there had no idea that there had been a women's platform in 1908. And why was that? And that's because no one had written the women's history. No one had written the books needed. Then you had upcoming historians who actually wrote about it, and it became like, oh, it's not for the first time. Did you know? 80 years ago it happened. But that also teaches us a lesson about women's history. Where is it? Who's writing it? Who's jotting it down? Exactly. And so the Women's Alliance is born a year later and runs for the parliament for Alþingi in 1983. And it was supposed to be a one-off, one term, like really an action. And it stayed there for, how many years? 16 years, 4 terms. And after 4 terms, without going too deep into history, we who were part of the Women's Alliance formed a new political party with the left of center parties in Iceland. That's a different history. What happened with the Women's Alliance, if I can just, we were in opposition, 4 terms in opposition. We were once very close to being a part of government. We didn't go in on principle. The principle was that the parties trying to form a coalition didn't want to agree on a minimum wage for everyone. And the Women's Alliance said, okay, we're not. And there was a big debate, you know, should we just have, you know, bitten the bullet and gone in or not done it? But what the Women's Alliance did two things, most importantly. It put the fear of God in the other political parties. They had no women running. And all of a sudden, you had, you know, women's lists in all constituencies. What were they going to do? You know, they had to show their women. And it happened in the next elections and the elections after. And all of a sudden, the number of women in the Icelandic parliament in the first elections in '83 went from 3 to 6, which are 6. And then it went from 6 to 12, and then, you know, grew exponentially, and we crashed the roof in, when was it, 2007? Yeah, 7, and again in 2009 when we had early elections. So now we have the quantity, you know, we have the numbers we need. We have a critical mass of women, and what happens is, of course, what happens with all politicians, men or women, people of all types, you know, they are tall, they are short, they are thin, they are fat, they have different opinions, they are not all the same. And not all the women participating in politics are from the, how to put, I mean, have this sort of the elitist credentials, i.e., you know, they do not all have, you know, university education as they did all the first women were basically mostly from very well educated, you know, activists. So that has changed, and I'm very thankful for that change, because what happens is that it eases the pressure. It's like, okay, we have all kinds of people in politics, women are like that, they're like this, it's the same as for men, you know. Not this, we are not measured by the same standard, but it's getting there. Slowly. But most importantly, what the Women's Alliance managed was to change the issue, basically what politics was about. In 1983, there was absolutely no discussion in the Icelandic parliament about domestic abuse, about rape, about incest, about all sorts of other issues such as environmental issues. The Women's Alliance was the first green party in Iceland. It was a grassroots organization. It had a flat structure, didn't have a chairwoman or anything like that. It was totally different from what was being done in the other parties. And the progressives, I mean, the biggest enemies were not the conservatives. No. It was the old Social Democrats and the old left wing who hated our guts, because we were taking their women and we were getting their seats. So that, you know, and it took a long time to, you know, get the cooperation going on that side of the political spectrum, and we managed it. But we sometimes still have that lingering feeling, even in the Social Democratic Alliance, which I come from. And I basically took part in forming this new party 15 years ago and putting an end to the Women's Alliance. Not all women thanked me for that, but it was something that we needed to do because it was the end of an era. We had basically gone up and down again, and we needed new methods to get the issues through. So what I'm saying, what I say to you is, don't replicate what we did. We all have to create our own structures, our own way of activism or being active in politics. What I hear from the study is that women in Slovenia are political and they care a lot about social issues, as women everywhere do, I think. But they choose alternative routes. That tells me that the system is wrong. The the system is not working. The system is not made, like you said, it's made by men, for men, to run a patriarchy, to run, you know, a system they like running, basically. And so what you need is either you go into the structure as it is, and you go into the political parties and you change them from inside, or you take to such action as something like a women's list or something else, whatever you feel is good and right for you to do at a particular point in time. And see if it works. Some things work, some don't work. I mean, there were, from the beginning, the Women's Alliance had a lot of detractors. You know, like, you'll never make it, was the first. No one will vote for you. You know, and then it was like, ooh, you don't get anything done in the parliament. You look back now, we changed the Icelandic political discourse, no less. Now all political parties have made these issues mainstream issues. And of course it's also what just has happened in the last 30 years in general in the world. But in Iceland, in our, you know, our example is an example where you really, the Women's Alliance pushed the political system, pushed it to change. And they would not have changed if not for this external threat, because it was basically a threat. And that's how they perceived it. And it's just, I mean, feminism is still perceived as a threat. Come on, you know, it threats the structures that are. It threats the power structures in society. It's not always, people are not always mindful of it. It's there. A lot of it is just, it's without thinking. It's just reflex. But you need to be aware of it, because you will always have resistance in a society that has had thousands of years of a power system that really does not have a place for women. And now, before I say more, can I say 2 words about maternity and paternity leave? Since on the issue of giving birth.
Maybe we could get
Later?
back to this.
I'll do that later. Sorry, but
No, but thank you, definitely. You mentioned the numbers are important. And Moita, working on the EU level and within the EU Parliament, EU is definitely considered as a trendsetter in terms of gender equality and pushing these quotas. But is this more, what's your feeling, I'm interested in, is this more, it's becoming a bad PR if you're not advocating for quotas, or do people that come into EU, to Brussels, really think this is a way forward?
No, definitely the European Union is a trendsetter regarding the gender equality. But you
There's
have
always
more
a
than
but.
1/3 of female politicians, elected members of the parliament that are female. But for example, this mandate that started in July was almost difficult to put together the Committee for Women's Rights. That tells a lot. This never happened before, and this time, because everyone is so allergic to the word of being a feminist, that nobody wants to, everyone thinks that some rights already achieved, because we have so many female politicians. But I totally agree with what was said till now. Only the number, I disagree just with this part, that the numbers could do the change. I don't think so, because not every woman is a feminist. Not every woman politician is there for the women's rights and for the socialist, promotion of social ideas and so on. We are different. Some feel that they are better in other fields, and they don't want to have anything to do with gender equality. They don't even want to mention, because they don't want to hear that they entered the parliament because they were under some quota system, or these stereotypes are still going on, even though there is 1/3 and more female politicians. Really, the fact that it was difficult to establish a committee of the European Parliament that has a historical, it was a historical committee always dealing or with gender equality, or with equal opportunities, or only with women's rights, tells me quite a lot. I didn't expect that, and when I entered the Parliament, I was a member of the European Parliament only for 3 years. We were discussing things that you cannot imagine. It was totally conservative backlash. That's why we were discussing abortion, the rights on abortion. We were discussing things that 100 years ago were already accepted. You know, the quotas not even there. I was negotiating. Do you remember the directive is supposed to get 40% of women on boards in big companies? So to get more women on higher places in the economic system. It was amazing. I had a colleague from a Eurosceptic from UK. He told me, "Oh, women should never get the right to vote." He said that in 2013. I was thinking, I was the youngest, that is true, but I was looking at this guy and I was thinking, are you insane? You really dare to say something like this in front of us talking about not emancipation, because it's not emancipation, it's a logical thing to do. Because all the analysis we had like thousands of analysis, because the companies did their analysis about how was the influence of more women in their companies, how better results they got, and so on. And I was showing him, you know, like, look, the results are here. It's not politics is saying that. It's the economy, it's the companies, the big companies in Europe telling you that. And he was like, no, there's something. It's incredible what these women dare to say. Of course, the directive it's blocked. And with the situation as it now, I have no idea if something will happen. And then another thing from the last mandate of the European Parliament was the maternity leave directive. You know, like how to unite, how many weeks should be a woman should be at home when she gives birth. It was impossible. In 5 years, it didn't move because again it was blocked. Just to find a common, just I don't know, or 20 weeks or 4 months or 6 months, or just to try to find this compromise was impossible because it was a female topic, but it's not. It's a topic for everyone. And these were the things that were going on, not even mentioning all the things regarding gay marriage or regarding quota. Okay, quotas were not even so bad in the end because some women realized that we need them to change the system. But the backlash that is coming back, that's what I'm afraid, you know, like you have more women politicians, but if they don't feel that they have to fight for some things that are already achieved or that could be lost in a couple of years, or just that you need 100 years to achieve them and then you can lose them in a couple of years just because some women think that there is not their topic, then I'm afraid the European politics is going that way. And I'm not even going to start with the Slovenian politics. In which direction Slovenian politics is going regarding this topic.
But you mentioned the backlash when someone is talking about quotas. I have experienced something of that, writing some columns on why we need quotas, and it's usually the same response. When you get hammered advocating for this, it's like, yes, this is a free pass for non-competent women. What is it, Professor Antić-Gabor, with this quotas, and especially with the word feminism, that gets such a bad vibration? Still, yes.
I can talk about quotas for hours, so I don't know how to shorten the story. I see the gender quotas as an instrument with which we can equalize the starting position of women and men, those one who want to enter into the field of politics, because we are on the unequal positions now. Many more men, as Katarina already said, enter the politics at the very beginning. They make the rules to serve them and to preserve the structures and the way of doing politics as they learned. And if we want to establish parenthood democracy, as we called it, we have to make different rules. We have to change structures. We have to change the way in which we are doing politics. And without women there to choose, to help and to see better, with the words of John Stuart Mill, we can't make a situation that women's voices can be heard if women are not there. That women's interests can be heard if they are not cooperating doing politics. So we have to make the situation to equalize the starting position for women to enter into the politics in more numbers. And then, of course, they have to cooperate together. Men and women, different women among themselves, as you said, and to change the situation from the inside, as well from the outside. Because a two-track strategy, as I've learned from Sweden, from other parts of Scandinavian countries, they, as Sonia already also know, that two-track strategies are doing better than only one. At the beginning, women were more active in the so-called NGOs and different structures outside the institutional politics, but they couldn't make so many changes they wanted, so they have to do in both ways. That's why I think that quotas are instruments with which we can bring more interested women to cooperate in politics. Of course, they're not all feminists. We can't be all feminists, but they have to work together and to hear each other and to support each other in the things they are in common, they have in common. And there are so many things that we have in common. So I think this as a starting point only.
To add upon this quota discussion, Slovenia was closely following this year's nomination for the commissioner, the EU commissioner, and our first candidate at that time, Prime Minister.
Are we going to import the people who have the children? I don't mind importing people who have children, but there's a lot of people who mind, actually. Okay, I'm sorry I'm being this brutally honest with you, but I think this is all tied together. So this helped us a lot, this new legislation. But I also think that what has helped Icelandic women is that culturally having children is not a problem. Having children does not mean that you have to go home. It used to be like that. When I was growing up, this is what it was. But it changed in the 80s. It changed in the 70s, it began to change, and it changed dramatically in the 80s and the 90s. Because there were feminists in politics and society was changing, is that you don't have to go home and return in 10 years or 18 years or something. You know, it's possible to do both. It's not possible to, in the US, you know this, people talk about having it all. You know, you have a great job, you have your husband, your 2 children, 18 months apart, you have a great career, and you have a mortgage, and you look fabulous, you're fit, and whatnot. No one has this life. No one. Yet it's an idea that's out there that's used to put women down. I know lots and lots of great women with great careers. You know, you don't have to tick into all the boxes, and you don't have to have children if you don't want to. I had my daughter when I was in the 2nd term in Parliament. I took my 6 months. I'm a single mom, and I did it. I had raised eyebrows, not from within my party, but from outside in society, almost like how dare she? But I was not the only one with small children, and being a politician and having small children is not a good mix, but you have to do it. This is if you have politicians who don't have children, you have bad politicians. You need politicians of all sorts of types, people who have small children, people who have had children, older people, the rest of it. And I was in a situation where in my party group, there was a lot of people with small children. So if you called in, it didn't happen often, but it happened as it happens in life, and said, I can't come to work today, my daughter's sick. But that was just the way it was, you know. And that's just the way life goes. You have to take, life is like that. Life is not Hollywood. You know, it's not about gender index in Hollywood.
Yeah, thank you. Very important topic. So many questions, but before we leave the floor to Q&A, I would just like to hear from the Slovenian side. Professor Antić Gaber, you ran like 2 years or 3 years ago the mentorship project on sort of merging aspiring politicians with women that already are or were doing politics, and I believe the Katarina Kresa was also part of the project. Tell us, how did that work, and would like to hear from all of you. Why is that important?
First of all, I would like to say that all young women or all people at all don't have an access to see from the near how politics looks like. There are some, young generations active in political parties. They have some, opportunity to see what is going on, but majority of them not. So the idea was, of course, the idea came from abroad. I've read some articles about mentorship in different European countries, how it works and how good results came out of that. And I proposed to, at that time, Office for Women's Policy to support us in doing this project, and they, of course, did. I invited all female ministers at that time, all female MPs at that time, and asked them to have one of the students from all of universities in Slovenia to spend a day with her to do everything as it was to do that day. Going around, having meetings, etc., etc. And also, if they can also invite them to work a little bit with them, not only to see and to watch. And it was really a successful pilot project. Out of we had 30, something like that. Jasna was in charge of the numbers at that time. Young students and ministers and MPs, that they worked together one day. At the end of the day, we came together and discussed the project. And I also proposed to, at that time, Office to enlarge the project, not only to the field of politics, but also to the field of academia, journalism, and economy as well. But again, it was a problem of money. I think that the project was successful, and maybe Katarina can say something more.
Are you going to continue with it? No.
We would like to. We would like to, and I got other people that would help us. We were doing this for nothing, rented. We didn't have any money for that, just for the publication, and we still want to do it, but we have some support, at least organization.
How was the experience for you, Katarina?
I found the project quite great, I have to say. It really gave the insight to these young ladies. There was one with me the whole day. We started very early in the morning and finished very late in the night, because I gave her the full menu, everything that happens from our these meetings that we have within the ministry, and then we went around Slovenia, because I think it was on the 8th of March.
Yes,
it was, yeah. So I did a lot for women in police at that time, so we had special things for them, so she was following me there. And then in the afternoon we had the party meetings, of course, and she was everywhere. Of course, everybody had to consent, but I said, you have to consent, so they consented. And she was there. She was quite amazed, because she had no idea how politics looks like. And you cannot really join if you don't know what you're joining in. So I find it really funny, and it also learned a lot from her, because she was asking me all the time and everything, and I think she was quite satisfied. And then we ended with this big meeting in the House of the Parliament. And I could see these faces, they were like lighting up, they saw something they could never see, and it's much easier to decide whether to go towards this path or not. But you said that there was no money for this. That's like the oldest excuse of men, When they want to stop something, they just say there's no money, not money for that. Well, I always found money for anything that had to do with women in our ministry. That was really in the lack of money. but you can always find like 50,000 euros or less, because that's really not much more than that, to push it forward. So I think you should raise the issue again and start forcing them.
The good thing is that we are taping this conference and we will repeat the sentence of Moitza. Yes, one is theory and the other is practice.
You also wanted to
I
invite...
also did this kind of things.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and we also wanted to invite you in the European Parliament, but
Yeah,
again.
we did something like that on the European level.
I know.
I'm mentoring a wonderful, beautiful woman, originally from Jamaica, but she lives in UK, and she's very, very involved in local politics, or let's say in Slovenia would be really like local community, but with high ambitions, very, very pro-European. That for Brits is not something very normal and sure, but she's really involved, and she's a black woman with clearly also following all the black movement and everything that is happening in UK and US. But she is a member of the Labour Party, and she has high ambitions, and she wanted to run for the European elections. And our project was running for 1 year. So she was regularly coming to the plenary sessions of the parliament and to the committee meetings, so she spent more days with me, because we are like, I was supposed to prepare her to become a European parliamentarian. She didn't, I didn't manage to enter the parliament, but she neither did it. It was a great experience, and I have to say from this experience, because it was a project focused on migrant women all around Europe. So all of us had someone someone that is really like not some like outsider from the country where she lived, and we were like not 30, but I think 11 female members of the European Parliament, mostly from the Greens and the Social Democrats, that were running this project, and it was a great experience. We just had the last meeting 3 days ago, just to evaluate how did it go, and it's true that most of us are not really in touch anymore, but me with my mentee, as she's called, Sancha, we became actually friends. We met just a couple of weeks ago in Brussels with family and everything, and I really think that she was so enthusiastic about what she saw that I think we got someone pro-European in London. So now maybe she could run for in the next 5 years. So she's campaigning pro-Europe, and she's really a great woman. I wish her all the success. But let's say all the girls that were entering this program were really migrants, and most of them were like black women. So it was really clear that they are like migrants, and they have no ways of entering politics from the background they have.
Okay, thank you. Now, if you have questions for our guests, please introduce yourself and tell who you have a question for, and I'm sure they will be more than happy to answer. Please.
Go ahead. It's a better word that was forced to us for so many years. I was also born in 70s, so I did have some years in the socialism, so I know how it was. But for the others, for other generations, it was worse, because it shows now in this time where we would have to have this, very healthy wish for success, to be better, to do something, to be original, to be men and women of the world. We're lacking that. And it's killing us, and it's suffering, and it's suffocating us. Because whenever you stick out, whatever you do, they will cut your head off. And of course, when there's so little women in politics, being a woman in a politic is sticking your head out, and it's not good because it can fall out very quickly. So in this way, it is combined as well. But to a certain extent, it was also an advantage being in Yugoslavia.
Okay, maybe just a quick question, and then please.
My name is Jenny Tumis. I come from the US, where we have a whole host of other issues with feminism and gender relations that are in many ways worse than the ones that exist here. But I've been living here for 2 months now, and I found something very interesting culturally going on, and it's more for the Slovenian side that my question is aimed. But when you walk around on the streets in the US, if you're a woman, you get catcalled every single time you go outside. It doesn't matter where you live. And I don't find that to be true here. And I wonder if my perception that there is a lack of objectification of women in society is actually true. It's like your reality. And then if that is true, then why hasn't this cultural change sort of gone into the upper echelons of politics and into the upper echelons of business?
Maybe it's a...
Frankly, we both are not completely clear.
Okay,
What are we supposed to be?
Catcalling is when the men go.
Yeah, on the streets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we wish for that, no?
Not really. Maybe our younger colleagues who are sitting here are the right ones to answer it. We've been watching different on the YouTube little short films showing how it is if you are a woman in the States, how it is if you are a woman in a Mumbai, etc., etc. Maybe here in Slovenia the situation is culturally slightly different because of this legacy of socialist time. Nevertheless, if this was forced or not, emancipation was there, and males have to accept that women can be equal. And maybe this lack of opportunity to show yourself in a different poses, in a different very colorful clothes, etc., etc., with the fashion from the Western part of the world, also brings some other attitude towards, image of women, and maybe something else is different. But it is changing here as well. So not to put everything in a very bright side. I think the situation is changing, and young women, especially in some, in some spaces and places, they are also in a position to be objectified in a media, in a different spheres.
Okay. Okay.
A very short. I would like to make a very short comment. Thank you
Okay,
very
Mr.
much.
President,
That's the button. Your coach is the button.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the very interesting comment. It's really interesting. What I wanted to comment on was the sentence you said. We are just 2 elections away from fascism in most of European countries. And these are bad news for women. Yes, I agree with this. And I think that Slovenia also has the problem of what is called illiberal democracy. The democracy which is fake. Everything is there and nothing works. The forms are there, but they are empty shells. Parties are empty shells. Parliament is an empty shell. The government is an empty shell. And people are in a big trouble what to do with this, but they need to move. And what is good, I think, is that women in Slovenia are moving and trying to come together in a way that they can influence the change of the system, not only enter into politics as it is now, but really to change it. And it's a paradox. Slovenia in the times, the last 20 years, had between 7%, 7.8% and 13% of women. Only the last parliament has so many women. And in these times, we were capable to keep practically majority of the good things from the socialist times. Child care facilities, abortion rights, high employment, full-time employment of women. Most of our social rights were in place. And now this is changing. So, and what is paradoxical, when we have the most of the women in the parliament, we had changes which were against this equality which was already there and which we fought for cross parties in big coalitions for 20 years now. So it's a big, big challenge in front of us.
Thank you, Sonia. And now we have to close the conference. We ran out of time, but there are many questions left. I would like to thank the panelists, the guests from Iceland, from Slovenia. Thank you for your insights, for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and for your contribution at the conference. It was definitely a pleasure. And thank you for coming. We have, in the name of the project Meta Dekleta, thank you all. If you want to take some manuals that we, within our project, manuals for beginners in politics. There are some there to grab, and maybe if you want to grab some badges, as I wear, also they're free to take. And again, thank you very much. I wish you good December, the celebrations, the Merry Christmas, and a wonderful 2015. Thank you. We, of course, can continue the debate over coffee and